We've richly benefited from your guidance and your development of our approach in serving children in need of services, in crafting our welfare reform strategies, and making our court system as sensitive as it can be when our families have interactions with our judicial system to make those events as sensitive to the needs of children as possible. We look forward to working with you to truly make educational opportunity available to every child in the country.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Kay, very much for the invitation to participate in the conference on this panel. It's a pleasure to be here with Jonathan, and Paul, and Marilyn, who, as she noted, I get to spend a significant amount of time with, which is always a pleasure for me, and I hope occasionally a pleasure for Marilyn. My name is Tom Weber. I'm the Undersecretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I'm also a parent. I've got two children that are engaged already in the benefits of early education. One who is a preschool student in the public school system in my hometown, and one who is a 20-month-old who actually is about to experience the benefits of early intervention. He's speech delayed, and we have had, frankly, the benefits of access to a system and the knowledge to access a system. So on a first-hand level, I'm experiencing each day what the benefits are of what we're trying to achieve, and I can already see what the challenges would be for families that don't have the ability to access the system in the way that my wife and I have the ability to access and know how to navigate. I think what I wanted to start off by saying is if the overriding question of the next several days is what are the opportunities and the roles for lawyers to participate in education and public policy, I think an easier question would be what roles aren't really open to lawyers or appropriate for lawyers to participate in education and public policy. I mean, after all, we're talking about lawmaking, we're talking about the development of regulations. This is, in fact, the skill set that each of you who are here, who are attorneys, study for and have perfected in your practice. And so when I get into a bit of a narrative and really sort of a short narrative of the agenda for the Patrick Murray administration, and each and every step of the way, lawyers have their fingerprints on every single accomplishment in every phase of the work. So I'll get into that in some detail. But what I wanted to raise was something that was a little bit broader, and I guess that would be the role of the business community in making fundamental change around public policy. And I can say firsthand from my experience over the last decade plus working in public policy, and then just my studying of education policy specifically, that no significant change has occurred in this state in the area of education without the strong, effective support of the business community. Whether it's the Education Reform Act of 1993 or the Achievement Gap Act of 2010, whether it was more smaller debates, although significant debates around the Common Core, for instance, or right now we're engaged in a conversation around how our community colleges should be structured and oriented. The business community has been an essential ingredient in pushing that agenda in one way or another. And I raise that actually as somebody who has legal training because I think it's actually interesting, and this is without any data, but I'm going to put it out there. Law firms are actually largely absent from those conversations. Not entirely absent, there are exceptions, but largely absent. When you look at the business community, business advocacy, and you look at the representation there, you don't really see a significant number of law firms involved in that. And I can understand that. There's a political dimension to each of these pieces, and it gets tricky. But I think it's something that I would regret not having sort of implored folks to think about in your own role, about how you might be able to get yourself or your firm, no matter what size, involved in the area of public policy and advocacy. And obviously, I say that without any agenda, whatever you think would be the appropriate direction for you and for your firm to go. But it's an important facet of the work that we do, and really an essential ingredient to the successes that we've been able to achieve as a Commonwealth. So So I mentioned that. I'm particularly excited. Actually, this week I saw that the Mass Bar Association has organized a Gateway Cities arm. And in the Gateway Cities, for those who aren't familiar with the term in Massachusetts, it's a term that is applied to our 24 largest municipalities, basically, outside of Boston. Those are municipalities that, unlike Boston, they're small to mid-sized urban areas that may not have some of the benefits that our capital city is able to derive by being our capital city. Boston is a place where national funders, for instance, often like to look to make an investment around education, but smaller cities and mid-sized cities don't usually see that kind of involvement of philanthropy in nonprofits, or at least in the same magnitude. And so I was excited to see the Mass Bar Association organize itself in that fashion, because it was fairly unique in my experience to see lawyers organize in that way. So I guess I wanted to make a plug along those lines, because if we're trying to move an agenda, for instance, it was discussed earlier, early education seems to be a no-brainer, right? Everybody will nod their head. Of course, the earlier we start, the stronger the interventions that we have at that point. Makes perfect sense. We saw Professor Heckman put up his diagram. Obviously, investments at that time are investments that you would want to place the very first dollar that you have if you're looking for a rate of return that's very high. And yet, it's incredibly hard to move the needle on an early education investment. It is, even in a state like Massachusetts, where you have the support of an administration, you have the support of the legislature. It's very hard to get an investment in the early years because it's a long-term investment. That's the first challenge that you face. And the secondary challenge that you face there is that it doesn't have, frankly, a very strong political community organized around it. So I just want to put it on the table to have you think sort of more largely as I get into sort of the nitty-gritty of what we've been doing over the course of the last 5 years, to think just as an advocate what role you might be able to play, because it's a critically important piece of what we're doing. So about the Patrick Murray administration agenda, as you heard from Marilyn, this is very personal, the issue of education to Governor Patrick. It's something that obviously resonates with his own life experience, and it has been from the moment that he started campaigning for office to this very moment, I think the highest item on his policy agenda list. It has never wavered in support of education. And as Secretary Revel noted, our goal in Massachusetts hasn't really changed over the course of the last 20 years, not since the Education Reform Act of 1993, when we set a goal of educating all of our students to the level of proficiency or higher. That's been the goal that we've had. And we made a monumental investment over the course of the last 20 years in education. At the same time, we instituted a system of standards and accountability, which most people see as the MCAS exam, and there's more to it than that. But we really sort of launched a national education reform effort through the Education Reform Act of 1993. And we've seen some very good results. And Secretary Revel already walked through all of the various successes that Massachusetts is currently experiencing in terms of our measurements nationally and in some cases internationally. But what we've also seen, it was noted, is that our achievement gaps in Massachusetts are just as pronounced as they are anywhere else in the nation. And in fact, if we really look at them, are even more pronounced than they are in other parts of the nation. And I think what we can fairly say after the course of 20 some odd years almost of education reform is that while the Ed Reform Act of 1993 and all that followed did a nice job of lifting all boats, what it has not done is gotten at a significant piece of the work, which is really trying to create equity within the system and close those achievement gaps. That's one of the objectives of education reform. So yes, across the board, student achievement has gone up, but when we really look at it, we've just raised everybody almost in equal amounts, and we still have the same gaps that we were facing 20 years ago. So when we look at our English language learners, when we look at our less affluent students, when we look at students of color or students with special needs, we really haven't moved the needle as much as we might have expected based on the set of reforms that we implemented in the kind of investment that we have made. So this is more or less what Governor Patrick was coming into when he was elected to office in 2006, and he assumed office in 2007. And the first approach that we took, I guess there were sort of two approaches that we took right off the bat. One was, it was an effort which we referred to as the Readiness Project, which was a massive, really grassroots effort of engaging a broad group of about 200 business leaders, civic leaders, and educators in a conversation around what kind of education reforms we should be undertaking as an administration. This went on for 9 months. It involved over a dozen community meetings, engaging well over 2,000 citizens across the Commonwealth, and we developed a set of recommendations around that. At that very same time, what the governor did was he came into office, he had campaigned on a very aggressive education platform, and he sized up how he was going to go about implementing that education platform, as well as what other recommendations came out of the Readiness Project. And what he had stepped into was a system that had 3 departments of education. We had the Department of Early Education and Care, which really at that time was still in its infancy. It was only several years old. It was the first in its nation to combine early education and care in one statewide office. It had taken components of what had previously resided in Health and Human Services and components of what had previously been in then called the Department of Education, which was really our Department of K-12. And combine them into one office. But it was a relatively new agency. We also had the Department of Education, which, as I just said, it was really the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, a much more established and largely successful agency, which was responsible for implementing the Education Reform Act of 1993. And we had a Board of Higher Education, which was a very decentralized oversight board for higher education, predominantly public higher education. And so the first order of business that the governor undertook was to undertake a governance restructuring for education and to try to resurrect for the first time in a couple of decades an education secretary, because we had 3 departments of higher education, each functioning at a either adequate level or a high level, I guess, to be fair. And they were operating largely in silos. They were doing a fair job about addressing a particular area. But a lot of what we were talking about, which was making the connections between early education and the K-12 system, particularly in those early elementary years. A lot of what we were talking about professional development, which obviously would involve higher education in particular in Massachusetts, our public higher education system. Those connections were not taking place at the kind of level that we might have wanted to. So we undertook what was called an Article 87, which is a bit of a high wire act as far as legislation is concerned, because it goes for a straight up or down vote before the legislature. There's no amendment that is allowed. So for 9 months at the beginning of the administration, now 6 months at the beginning of the administration, we engaged in a dialogue with the legislature to negotiate a new governance structure for education that would allow us to start making the connections in the way that we wanted to make across the education spectrum. And the political challenge that we faced in doing that is, and folks here that work within education will appreciate this, is education is deeply rooted in the tradition of local control. And the idea that you might create some kind of a state centralization agency is threatening. It's threatening to local government. It's threatening to those aspects of state government that were already in existence. And therefore, we had to find something that really struck the right balance and frankly was politically viable. We wouldn't so deeply offend local institutions or state institutions that we wouldn't comfortably be looking for. So we undertook that piece, and at about the same time we achieved that, which was in the summer of 2007. We also got the Readiness Project report results, which gave us upwards of 25 recommendations in 4 areas. It was very